Definitely varies by organization. Whether you're manufacturing or PCI shop, you probably typically should have that penetration test done more frequently. If you have a lot of externally facing applications, that too may dictate how often you perform some sort of test. So, what is a penetration test? Basically, it's just a snapshot in time of your network at that particular point in time that consultant is on site and says, here's what your network looks like. Here's some of the vulnerabilities that we see going on. And one of the primary difference between a vulnerability assessment versus a penetration test is you need to have that human element to look at those vulnerabilities and say, this really is not a vulnerability because this is a false positive, or this is a scanner that just doesn't think, right? It just, you hit go, and it says, here's your results, and that human has to kind of go through that and say, this is not really a vulnerability, or this really is a true threat, and looking at that overall landscape, and number 3 is really identifying those risks that could potentially impact your business. So that's more the penetration test, so it definitely requires a human element, where this is more that vulnerability test where you have that scanner or that person that just says, okay, I'm going to scan these IP addresses and click go and come back with a certain report. Now there's definitely some value to that, but that's definitely not what I would consider to be a penetration test by any means. So again, the primary difference is the human that verifies those vulnerabilities and can look at that and say, this vulnerability of the printer in the cafeteria does not pose as great of a risk as the perimeter firewall that has an OS on it that's no longer in support. So there's definitely some risk that is associated with that. Some typical reasons that you would want to perform some sort of pen test. I don't know how often your network changes, but again, depending on the size or the vertical of your organization, sometimes public, like a lot of applications, you have code reviews through that software development process. Networks are always changing. They're constantly changing. You're adding, re-architecting the DMZ, things of that sort. So there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different reasons for that. And of course, compliance is probably one of the biggest drivers that corporations or organizations require or should have penetration test. So everyone, I'm sure, is familiar with PCI, HIPAA, things of that sort. So what's specific to PCI, that you're required to have one annually. So that's one time for all your credit card data to be assessed. So, and typically your CISO or your CSO is bonus to being tied to compliance. And consistently, especially with the target breach and whatnot, compliance does not equal security. It doesn't. So that's why having a different stance on how often you have that penetration test greatly varies based on organization. So it's key. So our thought process is think more security and not compliance. So if you're given that snapshot in time of your network that says, here's what it looks like, and then this threat landscape is constantly changing. So if you're secure today, you may not be secure tomorrow because everything is changing so dramatically. And ideally, your penetration testers like to think like hackers or the red team to really exercise the network. So getting back to PCI specifically, this is PCI 2.0 and 3.0 is solidified, but a lot of people are still moving towards 2.0 at this time. but it does require at least once a year and after any significant infrastructure or application upgrades. Anybody know what significant infrastructure means? Or, I'm sorry, significant infrastructure change or modification means? It's what? So, if I put a new server in the environment, is that significant? If I do a code upgrade, is that significant? I mean, exactly. So this is compliance. It's not really security, right? And that's really one of the issues that I see with PCI specifically is how do you define significant modifications? You have 10 different QSAs. You could potentially get 10 different answers on what that means for that organization. So thinking a little bit differently regarding that, I definitely think needs to change. And I do think that PCI will go to PCI like law versus PCI compliance at some point, because we as consumers are basically taking on the chin, right? So it's up to us to secure things, right? So some of the costs that are involved, I've seen pen tests go from $5,000 up to like $150,000. That's $150,000. That's a lot. But again, it typically it's varies on your organization size, right? If you're a small shop, it may take about $5,000. But at the end of the day, that breach is way more expensive, than any other penetration test that you perform. Going into reputation, data exfiltration, then you're out of business. I mean, could be a whole plethora of reasons. Some fast facts here for you. 97% of all Fortune 500 companies have been breached, and the other 3% have. They probably don't know it yet. And typically 3 to 6 plus months before they realize that they've been compromised. So that's something, some sort of malware or something has been embedded into their network for anywhere between 3, 9, 24 months, as we saw in that recent article where the U.S. indicted those Chinese nationals. I mean, that's 2 years that they had no idea. So, and the last one, that the CISO would rather get divorced or go through a divorce than be involved in a breach. I thought that was kind of funny when I saw that, and but I guess there was a poll that was done, and that was the result of that. So how often should you have a penetration test? So we recommend 2 penetrations annually, and then having some sort of program for your vulnerability scanning, both from an internal and external point of view, so that when you actually do the penetration test, your results are not going to be in the hundreds or the thousands. They're going to be hopefully in the 20s or 50s. That your vulnerability scanner should be picking them up, and then you should be remediating as needed, and then having that pen test actually go through that attack portion from that point. You guys have any questions so far? I do have 2 tickets up here. 2 red tickets, I mean. Yeah. What kind of toast? I like rye toast. Yeah. No. So I want to end up with a funny slide as far as questions are concerned. Oh boy, what's going on? Okay. Oh boy, what does that mean? You put cuffs on me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now the fun begins. Again?
A shim. I got one.
You have one?
I think so. You know what? I think grape was wrong. That fell off. Oh, here it is. So I wanted to have this funny one funny slide up here that I thought was just hilarious. You have put them on backwards for me. Does anybody else have any other questions? Johnny, you need to get a good picture of this. I don't think I'll be able to get that. Or we can just take them off.
Okay. All right, that's fair. I'm so sorry about that.
This, so you hit them on the other side.
Thank you very much. You were very sporting.
Those are real ones, too. Those aren't like movie scene ones.
These are Smith & Wesson.
Oh, very nice.
They're very nice cups.
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
you.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions regarding how often for a penetration test? Yeah.
Sure. How often do you actually see clients actually
Never.
want to do the proper thing?
So that's a good question. So there are some companies that just get it and understand that compliance is one thing and security is something else, and they have those programs in place. A vulnerability management program that is they have a dedicated team of folks that do that. That's their primary job, and then they have that pen test once or twice a year. So it is rare. I think that you'll find companies wanting to do that more and more as you see, the next retailer getting breached. So any other retailers or anybody dealing with like HIPAA, PII, or the PCI companies. So I think you'll see they don't want to be in the paper, right? So I think you'll see a movement that will change that. So yeah. So I think it would really depend on how strong or how mature your vulnerability management is, both from internal or external. But to say you would at least one full black box annually, and then I would say yes. Because, and then your applications are that's totally separate. I mean, I think that's more web app, but I still think that's another huge vector as well. So yeah, that does get you a ticket, though. That was a good one. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, that's my talk. I didn't hear any giggles about the last slide. Yeah.